everybody, welcome to Vinyl Fetish, the YouTube channel where we talk about vinyl, records, music, things that spin around and around and around. We're doing a little series. I know we've got some new followers or some new subscribers, so I want to fill you in. We're doing this thing called 100 Albums That Matter. 100 albums that should be in your collection if you are a vinyl collector. Not the obvious things like Sgt. Pepper's. Like everybody knows you should have Abbey Road in your collection. We are talking about things that are a little off the mainstream, and I'm really excited about what we're talking about this week, which is the 1978 album Easter by the Patti Smith Group. And the reason we're talking about this, we were going to talk about Patti Smith sooner or later in this countdown, but the reason we're talking about it right now is because there's a bunch of people asking about Patti Smith right now because she got name-checked on the new Taylor Swift album, TTPD, the Tortured Poets Department. On the title track, she mentions Dylan Thomas, awesome, Patti Smith, awesome, and the Chelsea Hotel, which is a place where Patti Smith lived, and I spent a little bit of time back in the day before it got gentrified. In fact, there's probably a video that I can include in the description below of me at the Chelsea Hotel. So we're going to talk about this album and why it matters. So Patti Smith has kind of an interesting career arc, as this kid from New Jersey who comes into New York City to be a part of the bohemian art music scene of the Lower East Side of Manhattan in the early 70s. She's a writer, she's working in a bookstore, she gets a band together, and she's hanging out at Max's Kansas City and CBGB's and places like that, and puts out this debut album in 1975, Horses. And Horses, would be the obvious one. I mean, Horses is just a monster. It makes such an impact, and this new thing called punk in the mid-70s, before we really even knew what punk rock was. She's on Saturday Night Live singing Gloria, singing on Easter morning, Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine. So, it's making a big splash. I mean, that record is just so epic, so epic. And then she follows it up with the first record that's listed as a Patti Smith Group project, Radio Ethiopia, which is kind of a weird record for a lot of people. I mean, it has some really great songs like Poppies and Pissing in the River, which is, you're not going to hear a song called Pissing in the River in the mid-70s, but it is kind of noisy. She brings her spoken word bit in with a lot of guitars over, and it really didn't further her career in terms of moving her into a more mainstream audience. But then the third album was the album that sort of broke through, and that's Easter. She's working with a producer named Jimmy Iovine, who's very well known and has worked with a million people and has even been like a mentor on American Idol. And Jimmy is also working with Bruce Springsteen, whose career is starting to come up. Bruce Springsteen's had Born to Run, so Springsteen's kind of on the cover of all the magazines all of a sudden. And Bruce has a song called Because the Night that he can't finish. He doesn't have the lyrics for it. It just doesn't quite have the energy to put it together. And Jimmy Iovine says, hey, can I take this over to this other artist that I'm producing? It's sort of my first big producing project named Patti Smith. Bruce knows Patti. They play in the same places, Bottom Line and Max's. And he's like, yeah, sure. Give her the song, let her do her magic to it. So Patti takes this song, reworks it, and turns it into this thing that becomes her sort of one and only hit on the radio. And I certainly remember hearing Because the Night on the radio and thinking, this doesn't sound like anything else that's out there, especially stuff coming from female vocalists. It was very powerful, and it was really kind of a Springsteen, Patti Smith record together that was on this record. But there's more than that on this record. I mean, this album is a good document of Patti Smith in 1978, still one foot in the CBGB's punk rock scene, one foot kind of out touring. She'd sort of recorded this after she had a serious neck injury, I think, touring for the last album. So she'd, gone through a lot to get this record out. And it captures a lot of the energy of the live band. It also has lots of religious imagery in it. As a Catholic girl, she's struggling with a lot of these themes. It's called Easter. I mean, that should be clue number one. But also the poetry. There is this bohemian thread, and she, in a way, sort of steps into, I hate to say it, Jim Morrison's footsteps after Jim Morrison dies, because she's kind of connected to him. But there's also, Arthur Rimbaud and Baudelaire and all the great bohemian poets are wrapped up in this desire to take the spoken word and turn it into music and set it free. There is a particular track, because the night was a big one. Privilege was the second single off the album that didn't do as well, but it's also a really amazing song. But there's a song on this record I feel like I need to talk about. And the title of the song uses the N-word. I'm not talking about nice or nicotine. I'm talking about the N-word. And rock and roll N. I'm not just going to say that. Back in the day, I used to think, well, if it's in the proper context, I can use this word, N-I-G, word, because it's in the context and people know that I'm not using it to be a white supremacist or cause people harm or trauma. I'm now just not using it at all. I feel like as a white person, it's just not my prerogative to ever use this word ever again. But in the day, in the 70s, it was not uncommon to hear white artists use this word in a way to highlight racism or to make a point about racism. So this comes out in 78 and 72, 6 years earlier. Beatle John Lennon had a single called Women Are the N of the World that he wrote with Yoko Ono, trying to make the connections between racism and sexism. You didn't really hear it on the radio very much, because even in 1972, that language was not appropriate for the radio. Bob Dylan, on his song Hurricane, that was out sort of right before this one, excuse me, the song about Hurricane Carter, the black boxer who was convicted, even though he was innocent of murder, just because he was black, and somebody saw a black person on the scene, uses the N-word. And Patti Smith used it. Patti Smith used it to sort of talk about people that were on the outside, people that were rebels, people that were, marginalized, not just black people, but anybody that was kind of a misfit in society was an N. If you go on Spotify to listen to this album, you won't find that song. It's been taken off. I don't know if it was Patti Smith that took it off. I kind of think it was, because Marilyn Manson did a cover of that song, and it's still on Spotify. But there's a different sensibility now, and she, played that song live for years and years and doesn't play it anymore, because we've kind of changed the thinking about that, and the notion that word can be traumatizing. But the idea was that there is this connection between the bohemian artist, who typically is white, and African Americans. In fact, if we go back 15 years earlier, in the beatnik era, Norman Mailer referred to the beatniks as white Negroes. The idea is that they're alienated, they don't fit in society, they're on the outskirts, they're on the outside looking in, kind of like black people. The difference is those bohemians, grow up. It's like white kids liking rap music. Like, white kids love rap music because there's a similar sense of alienation of being on the outside, and you can identify with it when you're 17 years old, but then all of a sudden you're 39-year-old banker and you're not that alienated, and black people are still black and are still alienated. So it's a little bit of apples and oranges. It's not sort of the same type of alienation, but there is this theme. And one of the things you see in this is Patti has a bit of an obsession with Jimi Hendrix. I mean, if you know about Patti Smith, she's recorded at Electric Lady Studios. And she references Jimi Hendrix. This album has a lot of guitar dissonance. It sounds a lot like Hendrix, and she refers to Hendrix with that word, trying to make a connection between herself as a musician and him as a black musician. And it is, we see it differently now. We're looking at this word differently. We're looking at the notion of words as microaggressions or words as sources of trauma. But I wanted to talk about this album particularly because the only way you get to hear that track at all is on the vinyl record, or if you have an old CD of it, I guess. But also to hear it within the context of the other songs, that you understand that she's not coming at it from a white supremacist perspective. But at the time, I think she probably didn't really get the hurtful power of that word. I mean, she used to say when this record came out that she used the word all the time because she thought she was talking to people who were like her by using that word. And it just doesn't work like that. The record, the band on it is great. One of the people that she has on here on the song Space Monkey is Alan Lanier, who was her boyfriend at the time and also the keyboardist for Blue Oyster Cult. You are a bone like a saint with the consciousness of a snake. Patti, ever the poet. Patti has continued to put out good music. There was one more album after this one, Wave, in 1979, that was produced by Todd Rundgren. And then she kind of dropped out for a while to take care of her family, her kids, and she reappeared. And we were so, in the 1980s, just wishing that we had her. And finally, in 1988, she came back with the People Have the Power record and then started making records again, including with Lenny Kaye. I was one of those people that just wanted to see her, to be in the presence. I got to meet her one time at Powell's Books in Portland. We had a great conversation about our common connection with Kurt Cobain. That was really great. Got her autograph. And she did a show in the early 2000s, 2001, I think, at the Crystal Ballroom, where I finally got to see her. I was pressed up against the stage. And because she's the Bohemian poet, she starts reciting Ginsberg. She's doing Ginsberg's Howl in the middle of this show with all these songs. And it was recorded and put on a double compilation set called Land, recorded in Portland, Oregon. And you can hear me screaming my freaking lungs out. Ah! Patti Smith. I'm on a Patti Smith record. That's my case. I'm sticking to it. I'm on that Patti Smith record. So that brings us to the present, where she has been name checked in a Taylor Swift record. And there's a lot of people that would think that Taylor Swift and Patti Smith are so opposites. Patti plays in close, small clubs, with people, right up to her. I mean, when I saw her that time at the Crystal Ballroom, she had her bare foot up on an amp, and a woman tried to kiss her foot. You're that close to her. The music is close. It's punk rock. It's energetic. It's rebellious. And Taylor Swift is on the Eras tour, playing to 1 million people around the globe, and is a multi-billionaire by this point. How could these two women have anything in common? But there is a real connection. I think there is a real connection. I think it's why Taylor Swift mentions Patti Smith on her new record, because they both believe in the power of the word, the way that you can put words together in an interesting way, this strange collision of things that express both what's happening internally and in the world, and do it from a strong female perspective. That there's a backlash against Taylor Swift like crazy. There was a backlash against Patti Smith just for the album cover, because you got the underarm hair there. What's that all about? Saturday Night Live did a skit with Gilda Radner, kind of mimicking Patti Smith as Candy Slice, and they had to have the underarm hair because here's a strong woman. She has to be mocked. And so I think there's a real parallel between the energy that Patti Smith has put out with regards to words and a strong female voice, and what Taylor Swift is doing now. And so I think it's right to link these two great artists, even though in many ways they're very different. Although, here's what I want. I want Taylor Swift to get rid of the synthesizer and get a band like the Patti Smith group, maybe get Lenny Kaye backing her up and rock out in a small club somewhere and get that goddess energy that Patti Smith has been pioneering for so long. Patti Smith's still out there doing great things. You can find her on Instagram, on Substack. She's still going strong, well into her late 70s. We love Patti Smith so much. All right, I wanted to talk about this record. I want to spend a little bit of time. This is, if you haven't bought any Patti Smith or haven't streamed any Patti Smith, Easter is a great place to start. You really get a good sense of her as an artist. This record matters. Patti Smith matters so much. Even this underarm hair matters. And Easter matters. This music matters. You matter. So let's talk about it. Up next on Vinyl Fetish, we're going to talk about the Husker Du album, Zen Arcade. Zen Arcade from 1984. Tune in and subscribe and like and join us in the Vinyl Attic. Woo!